You want to present? Yeah. Because I need to. Well, no, because it'll just be in the. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Present us, and then we can press the button.
Okay. So this is we're gonna record live program of the GFN podcast. This is part of the Groningen Feminist Network community. I will also be joining for the podcast. So the Groningen Feminist Network is a community-led network of like-minded people, inclusive of all genders, identities, sexualities, races, religions, ethnicities, educations, class, and abilities. It's mainly focused around discussing feminist topics. It has its own monthly podcast in which the hosts and various guests give their own perspective on different topics and current events. This live podcast is going to be revolving around the topic of bodies, so our personal stories with our own bodies, and the different perspectives that come with that. I think that's mainly all. I'm going to give the word back to you, George.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Okay, so that means we are live now. I'm going to start the timer because we have about an hour. So Claudia did a pretty good job of introducing us. We record about once a month, and I think I'm just going to jump straight into it by introducing myself, and you all can introduce yourself the way we always do. Reminder for the listeners at home that we will be, GFN has weekly meetings at 8 p.m. at Jimmy's on Wednesday evenings. My name is George, my pronouns are they, them, and I guess we can go just...
Okay. My name is Tessa, and my pronouns are she, her.
My name is Millie, and my pronouns are she, her also.
My name is Claudia, pronouns she, her.
My name is Emmy, and my pronouns are they, them.
And my name is Veerle, and my pronouns are she and
as you all know, so I'm just going to do a quick little spiel and then we can get into the conversation. As you all know, this year's Broken Words Festival is all about bodies. And when we were discussing how best to tackle this subject in podcast form, we sort of hit some walls, some boundaries. When it comes to bodies, every person's is positioned differently in society. We all relate in different ways to our outsides and our insides. And others relate differently to our bodies and our embodiment. Some are seen as beautiful, some as desirable, others are seen as ugly and are hated, some are sexualized and others are desexualized. Some are seen as the norm to which other bodies must aspire. For as many bodies as there are people who are experiencing real consequences from how others view them. So how can a 6-person panel accurately discuss or depict those many and varied real experiences? On the other side, our show is a conversation that is usually limited to a small attic space and recorded and produced for an audience that largely cannot interact with us, or at least not take part in our conversations while we're recording. And this conversation, which is ultimately going to be about bodies and embodiment, which is something that everyone here experiences to some degree or other, was something that we wanted to make accessible to you, our very first live audience. We figured the best way to have this conversation is to keep it personal. We're going to talk about how we personally relate to our bodies and how we see our bodies in society. And after our first sort of introductory conversation, we're going to invite you to take part. This basically will go in the following format. We'll introduce a question, and if you have a burning desire to comment, to answer, or to critically examine an aspect of this question, you can join us at the table, right next to Claudia. I think it's easiest if only one person comes up at a time because there's already 6 of us. And basically we'll just discuss this question until we reach a natural conclusion in our conversation. You can go back to your seat, we'll ask another question, someone else can come up. We have half an hour to do this conversation bit, and then we'll move on to our closing segments. If there's any people who regularly listen to our podcast, which you can find on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Mixcloud, just GFN podcast, shout out. But yeah, we have some regular segments that we sort of alternate to finish up our podcast. Now I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to ask actually one more question to my fellow panelists. How do you feel that your body is positioned within current mainstream views of beauty, desirability, health, how bodies are basically seen or policed in society. I don't know if we want to go this way or that way.
Okay, I guess I can start. It's a heavy question to start with.
I know. Do you want to start with something lighter? I did ask.
That's fine.
That's
That's
good.
fine.
That's good work into deep.
That's fine. Okay. This is what I'm gonna say. And still I think I speak from a place of certain privilege because I'm cis, I'm white, I'm able-bodied. I think for me the most visible way in which society tells me I'm not worthy enough is because I'm fat. There's a lot of.
I think we shouldn't even call it fat.
I know.
You know,
I'm
like
fine.
it's just
I think
bigger.
I don't know. I think it's a word. I grew up being very afraid of it, and the older I get, the older it's like, no, fuck it. I am fat. So what? Like, why does it have to be like a bad word or a taboo word or like, no, you look fantastic, but me who like I'm a size 40. Oh my god, look how fat I got over the summer. And it's like, what are you talking about? But it's still like, it's something that you can say to yourself when you're considered like within the boundaries of what's thin, then it's fine. But if you actually go to a fat person and say, hey, you're fat, then it's like an insult. So there's like a very like double-edged sword to this word, which I'm very confused about. And I'm like, just whatever. And yeah, that's like my main thing in society. That you have to learn like how to navigate, because it can make you feel like you're not desirable enough or worthy enough, or oh, no one's gonna look at me in a way because I'm not beautiful. And then from another side, it's like, okay, I'm at a point where I'm not sexualized all the time because I'm not in that like canon of perfect beauty, which is also a good point to be. So I think it's kind of like a weird place, but it's not like, as you grow older, it gets to be a better place, I think.
Yeah, I follow you by also mentioning privileges, because I think it's important for me to note that I am white, I'm relatively thin, I'm able-bodied, I have health insurance, and I have a stable enough income to be able to look after myself healthily in terms of food and shelter. But at the same time, I do experience certain oppressions as a trans non-binary person. And I was just thinking about it literally on the spot. And I think the biggest oppression that my body faces is gaslighting. Because I think especially trans and non-binary people, if I'm speaking too quietly, please tell me to speak up.
Maybe with the machine capacity.
Yeah, that's better. I think especially trans and non-binary people, in terms of their bodies, they are gaslighted as
How many noise can you make?
I think the windows are closed.
Yeah, the windows are closed. This is the soundproof as we're getting. It's okay.
My bad.
It's not your bad.
I can speak up a little. What was I talking about? Gaslighting, yeah. Because, you know, a very binary gender and sex system is placed on bodies, and it's about appearance, and it's about physical characteristics that are split into one of two groups. And I think I would consider that a form of gaslighting, because if your gender doesn't correspond with the binary sex that you're assigned at birth, or even if it does correspond but you present differently and so forth, you're read completely differently than how you would like to be read. And so I think that is a form of gaslighting, because it's kind of saying, no, actually you don't exist how you think you exist. So I think that's the biggest oppression that I would face.
Yeah, really interesting what both of you said. And I think I have to also like start by first of all acknowledging also my privileged position. So I am transgender, and in a sense I am not really fitting into like this beauty ideal of femininity, which is often expected also of trans women. So But on the other hand, I do have all sorts of privileges in the sense that I am even able to like pursue a medical transition. I am I'm highly educated and I'm white, so this gives me a lot of easy access to a lot of spaces and a lot of ways in which I can get support and can get into things. So I feel like I have a lot of different privileges that I really should acknowledge. Of course, I have health insurance. Here in the Netherlands, we also have the situation that a medical transition, there's a lot of parts of the medical transition that are actually being paid for by your insurance or by the hospital, stuff like that. So, but after acknowledging all that, I also have to say that I do feel often like I don't really fit into this mainstream society mainly. When I'm at a festival like this, I feel totally safe and fine. Like it's a really nice and diverse crowd, and it doesn't feel like I don't feel like conscious of my body or anything. But it can be very difficult to like go out shopping, for example, and to have this kind of experience where like everything is very clearly gendered and all the clothes are made for thin, beautiful women. I think not just trans feminine people, but a lot of people suffer from that it seems to be all made for like tiny little doll figures or something like that, and not everybody has a body like that. So I don't know, and I often get stared at and looked at weirdly, especially by just cisgender hetero people tend to be sometimes even a little hostile towards me. So and presumably that's on the basis of how I look, because I haven't even spoken with them at that point. So I think that's something that I'm noticing. I will pass it on to you if that's okay.
Similar story as you all. I do experience a lot of privileges in terms of my whiteness, being able-bodied, being thin enough by most people's standards, I would say, and by mainstream society's standards. I think the way I position my body in society is much more, I see it almost as a place of being incognito often. It's maybe sort of adjacent to your sense of being gaslit, is that people will rarely recognize instantly that, this is a person whose gender is not, a binary gender. I think people usually see me either as a very young boy or as a butch lesbian. You can probably attest to that. It's probably the shirts. I think this sort of, I don't per se think, I think this position of sort of flexibility is something that I both appreciate and hate sometimes. Like, I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to shift my presentation a bit, or to, have also this sort of safety that people don't quite know where to categorize me, and thus I'm often freed from that sort of categorizing violence that often happens. I don't get catcalled because people don't instantly see, is this someone I can catcall or not? At least that's how I think it probably happens. That's just my perspective of it. And of course, as someone who is assigned female at birth, being gender non-conforming in a not scary way, I think it's different if you're like bigger or like buffer or scarier to, the cis hegemony. But crossing gender boundaries, wearing men's trousers or men's shirts isn't typically men's, in quotes, isn't as big a transgression for me as it would be for you, in whichever way you would choose to go. Because if, cis people see you dressing femininely, they're like, ooh, what is this? And if trans people see you dressing butchly, they're like, oh, well then you might not really be.
Yes, not trans enough for something. Yeah, I get that.
So yeah, that's just my thing, I guess.
So for me, I'm also privileged in the sense that I'm white and I appear able-bodied or non-disabled, I guess. And that is, I guess, also what I struggle with a lot because people overestimate my abilities because I'm autistic and you can't see that, but when you talk to me, you can kind of notice sometimes. And in the sense of my body and how I experience other people reacting to that, I feel like I'm hypersexualized very often because I'm a curvy woman with ginger hair, and I don't know what it is about men or cis men and ginger-haired women, but we are sort of the stereotype of hypersexualized nymphomaniac women or something, and I feel like that is projected on me a lot, and that I don't really have a say in that. Other than that, I also experience that because I'm curvy, I somehow feel like I'm not really part of the skinny gang, but also not really of the fat gang, and I kind of identify as a fat person, but sometimes fat people think, oh, you're not fat enough to be part of it. And also sometimes skinny people, or a lot of the times, skinny or thin people think I don't belong there either. So it's kind of weird to be sort of in the middle and not feel part of anything at all. But other than that, I am okay-ish with my body.
I think it's an interesting point that you raised about people seeing you as able-bodied, but you do have a disability, and that I feel like we're kind of sort of really making it a bit of a dichotomy now between mind and body, but actually your mind is also a part of your body, and I think that's also a really valid point you make, that's also a way that you're embodied in society, like being autistic is something that affects your place in position of society and also of your body, you know?
Yeah, because people expect, since you appear able-bodied, nobody feels like you're somebody that needs special attention or special care or anything, while sometimes that is necessary. And it's almost like sometimes I feel like hanging a sign around my neck saying, oh, please don't. For example, being in this room and having the crowd upstairs and having the sirens and the clocks and it's really chaotic to be here, and it's all part of the experience, but nobody sees any of that. And sometimes I think it would be nice if I had something to show what I'm struggling with.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not always how disabilities work.
Alas, sure would be easy if everyone could easily relate to.
Yeah. Show some empathy.
Well, how I experience beauty, my experience comes from also, I would have to talk about my country, which is Trinidad and Tobago, and it was colonized by the British, and so through that colonization and also slavery, ideals of beauty in Trinidad are what, of course, I grew up learning, and that was basically a Eurocentric standard of beauty. So people would, basically in my country there's a lot of colorism, and so I had a hard time loving myself for being black, and then also I am transgender, so also in that sense I had a hard time loving myself. And I would say that I am privileged in a certain way also, like the rest of you said, to be, passing enough to walk on the street and not be harassed by people, or maybe it's just my the way I am. Maybe I walk fiercely, but I would say that I am privileged, and I think in having that privilege, I also have to use that privilege to bring up the beauty of transgender people and of Black people, so my beauty standards were, of course, white, looking at the white man or people as the standard of beauty. But, as I became more awoke, I realized that there are different ways to be beautiful, or different, different kinds of beauty. And I started discovering my beauty as a Black person, and as a trans person, and as a person from the Caribbean, and as an immigrant. So, now I think I'm getting closer to my true beauty, but it wasn't always like that.
So you sort of experienced your true beauty as really also recognizing the beauty that was kind of inside you all along. That sounds
And also, the beauty in difference, and diversity in other people.
Yes.
So that there's not just one way to be beautiful. That there's all kinds of beauty, and we need to find that beauty in ourselves. So. Yeah.
Okay, first round, heavy stuff. Who wants to come and I want to maybe start with this one. It's kind of heavy, but it might be if you're up to it. Is there something about your body you used to hate but have later come to accept or love? Is anyone who feels up to the challenge or the task?
Yes.
Yeah, come join us.
Join? Oh, join. I was like, I'm going to sit here. Yes.
You can just come answer the
Okay.
question, have a chat.
If you're close to this, then
okay.
the podcast can actually hear you as well.
Okay,
Is that okay? We will be, it's being recorded. It will be put online.
Oh, okay, so that's okay.
Maybe introduce yourself first.
Who are you?
My name is Tamali Viashi. I'm 32 years old. I'm a mom. And I was born in Holland, in Groningen. And my parents are also from the Caribbean. But my mom is from Aruba. And my father is from St. Kitts. And but the question was, because I was brought up here in Groningen and in the school, I was raised in Oost Park, and in that time I was the only Black girl in the school. So I really struggled with being also different, and they made me also let me know that I was different, because I was first not aware of being different, but then a couple of kids did a lot of nasty things to me, and I came aware of being different. So I struggled a long time, and when I was 21 years old, I committed suicide because I didn't want to be a woman. I didn't want to be a Black woman, and I didn't want to be living in a world that's so harsh. Not even only to a Black person, but to everyone else. I couldn't deal with the hardship of the world. So what I really struggled with my complexion was my nose. Everything in my pictures, I was like, my grandmother was always doing like this to my nose, like, making more straighter and not like wider. And so I was very self-conscious about my nose. But now I love my nose, and because my daughter has my nose, and but it took me a really, really long time to accept my nose. So that was really the part that I really didn't accept about myself, but that was the really biggest part of being that had me struggling. So
I think you have a beautiful nose.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yes.
I can sit back.
It was
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sit back on the
Okay.
Does someone else want to share a story?
Anybody else? Some part of your body or aspect of your body that you used to not like so much and now you've got to love it more or have come to accept it? Hey, Mama. Hey.
Hi. Introduce yourself for the record.
Okay, my name is Momo. I have a really long name, but it's gonna take a while for me to pronounce it. But so I live in Groningen now, but I'm originally from England, and I came here to study illustration and design here. But yeah, I mostly grew up in England. I grew up in London. So it's a very diverse city and everything like that. And yeah, that's what it's mostly known for, being a big and colourful city. So because my parents are originally, I'm second generation Nigerian, British Nigerian. So I was just born there. I grew up with a very religious family, a very Catholic family, and I think the part that I didn't really like about myself was my hair. So I've had a really difficult journey with my hair because it was very, I had most of the people in my class were white and there was a few black people, and obviously being in that group, I was kind of really picked on for being the very quickly shy black child in the class, and obviously my parents were very proud of their roots and they really cherished their roots, and hair was kind of a big thing that I really didn't like because all the other girls had nice straight hair and I had this afro that was just very untamed, and I just wanted to have hair like this because it was just easier to manage. And then eventually it was the first time I got braids, and all the other white girls, they kind of started pulling on my braids, and I think there was a time where I just really hated wearing braids because I was scared that all the other kids in primary school were going to come there and pull on my braids, and the feeling of pulling on my braids was kind of invading my space, and it was, it's very rude to just go up to somebody and just pull on their hair like that. So for a while I didn't really want, when my mum said, "You're gonna go get your hair done," and I was just like, "Please don't make me wear single braids." So for a while, when I was in secondary school, I wore a cane row, which is where you the long hairstyle. I wore that for a while because I was so self-conscious that people were gonna come and tug into my hair. And then eventually, it wasn't until I got to the adult stage that I was at war with my hair, just the thought of trying to take care of it and look after it, and look at so many people for inspiration, because eventually it wasn't of recent that the whole natural hair movement kind of became a big thing, and I thought, you know what, it's my hair, I can't really, it's up to me it's up to me because it's my hair at the end of the day, it's no one else's, so I have to kind of just find a way to make it my own. So occasionally I wear wigs, occasionally I wear braids, or I just have my hair up because I just want to. But obviously being here now, and especially since I go to an art school, it's a predominantly white place.
Yeah.
And of course there's some people who've not really been around people of colour that much, so I think it's just this week I had people come up to me and touch my hair, and I can say it was just, the amount of times I had to slap people's hands and everything like that. It's really annoying, and I have to tell people it's disrespectful for me to come to your hair because to touch your hair like that. But now I love my hair, and now I can do whatever I want with my hair, and nobody has to tell me which way is right and which is wrong.
I think it's worth stating for the listeners at home that now you do have braids in your hair.
Yeah, that's, yeah, I've wearing braids temporarily. I've sort of reddish, pinkish kind of shade.
Yeah. And it matches your t-shirt.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your story. This is really cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No problem.
Our way. I think it's I mean, I want to say interesting, but that doesn't do justice that both your stories basically involved really racialized violence towards your bodies that made you feel that it wasn't, that your bodies weren't good enough, that your hair wasn't good enough, that your nose wasn't good enough, or that it made you a target and that made you feel unsafe. And I think it speaks to the way in which you know, marginalization is something that can really affect how you feel about yourself.
And how beauty standards are based on very colonialist,
Yeah, like you said, Eurocentric beauty standards.
Eurocentric.
You know, across the world, really.
Yeah. So much of it is about power and has power.
I think also, you know, like in my in the Black community as well, it's really difficult to like really overcome those ideologies and mentalities of thinking of Eurocentric beauty as the standard, because it has been ingrained into us for hundreds of years, and I think we're getting over it, but it's slowly, because undoing such a long time of trauma takes a long time also.
Because that's really what it is. It is a trauma that is sort of embedded into like a sort of cultural memory.
Yeah, because also even in myself, I think I am in the process of healing. For example, I didn't like my skin color, I didn't like my hair, but yeah, I think I'm on the road because I'm conscious about it, and I do things to go in that direction. But it is a struggle every day, you know. Like, but I think I am getting better at it. So I think in my personal experience, it takes a lot to really overcome it, and some people might not even see the total change in their lifetime, you know, because of the effects it has on us.
You have 5 until 10 minutes left, yes?
Oh, we started 10 minutes late.
We have.
Yes, and now it's 10 minutes late after the original ending time.
I thought we had till 8:30.
Oh, yeah, sorry, go on.
Thank God. We only just got started.
Yes.
So much to discuss.
us.
Okay.
Right.
Sorry, I think you sort of got interrupted.
Yeah, I was just saying from my experience and the society I grew up in, which was a post-colonial society, the effects of how the ideologies of Europeans then it affected the people. I still see it, so that's to tell you how much of an effect it had on us, since it still affects generations now. So what I was trying to say is that because of that, it takes, you know, I experienced it in my own journey, that it takes a lot of time and energy to really overcome these things.
Is there anyone else at the table that wants to? Yeah, first of all, that's really beautifully put and really good. And I think this is like, you talk a lot about your personal journey. I think in a moment I would like to talk about like if there's a way that we can take on a collective journey. But first I'd like to ask if anyone at the table has anything they'd like to add or have a different angle on the original question, or
I was just thinking when everyone was speaking, and it is a bit of a tangent, I suppose, but I want to really make that what I'm about to say very succinct. You were talking about, kind of beauty ideals that are forced onto people, and I think when we do talk about that, it's a huge topic and we could talk about it for hours. But something that I would like to shortly mention is capitalism, as always. But I think it's just worth mentioning at this point kind of why we do buy into these beauty ideals, or why we're forced to buy into these beauty ideals, should I say. And these hegemonic beauty ideals they don't come from us, they come from the media we see, and I think that's like one of the largest places, the advertisements that we see and the products that we buy. And ultimately, I think, if we're talking about the gender binary and also about blackness and whiteness, a lot of what this boils down to is buying products to make yourself fit the standard that is put upon you, or creating, two markets, male and female, so that there are two markets that people have to buy products from to create double the revenue. So I just wanted to drop that in there. You don't have to talk about it, but I thought it's worth to mention.
No, I totally agree. They're consciously working to make people feel not beautiful enough, make people feel shit about how they look, so that they can sell more products. It's right now really to the benefit of so many companies, and there's so many millions being invested, every billions probably being invested in maintaining those ideas of what a beautiful body is. And as long as that is out of reach for almost everyone, that's the situation they want, because as long as it's kind of out of reach but almost reachable, everybody will feel like, well, if I just buy a few more beauty products, if I buy this and this really expensive technology or something, I might be beautiful.
It's kind of weird that we call them beauty products, because often these things are really harmful to your body, whitening lotions and lollipops that suppress your appetite, and stuff you put up your vagina so that you smell of dish soap instead of actual vagina smell. And
self-harm products would be a more accurate.
I think put your body through more trauma just to fit an ideal.
Yeah, but how do they do that? Like you were saying, it's through representation. Representation is a powerful thing. And that's what I think minorities need, more representation, so we could actually represent ourselves the way we want, and also so that we could see other ways of being beautiful,
which is why we share stories like this.
Although I also feel like now that big companies kind of see minorities, they're kind of profiting off of these minorities by putting them as the face of their new campaigns. And I don't know,
but it's actually funny that you say that, because there's this big craze over mixed people, where people say that they're not too black, but they have the perfect.
And in advertisements, they can be like, "Oh, look, our advertisements are diverse because look at this beautiful mixed race child."
Should we move along to our next question?
I kind of wanted to.
Or do you want to still?
No, I think we're ready, and I think it's a very good sort of the segue, because you sort of started talking about sort of things that, as a whole, need to change to see a change in these beauty standards. And my question to everyone in this room: how do you believe we can subvert, dismantle, or somehow change society's beauty standards? Or maybe should we even subvert the concept of beauty and standards, that kind of stuff? So how can we subvert this stuff? Is there anyone in the group who wants to talk? You can both come up, otherwise. If you pull your chair a little bit closer, you can come on the stool, and Penelope, you can pull your chair a bit closer. Yeah, come on. That's it. It's great.
Or now if you take that chair there, which
Yeah.
there's no one sitting there anymore. Or is there?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll turn this one around and then.
Right.
Yeah. So introduce yourself.
I'm Nicole Sarishvili. I was born here in the Netherlands. My parents are from Georgia. They fled here as refugees in the 90s from the Soviet collapse. So basically, I've been here all my life, but indirectly, I've experienced the migrant experience basically through them. The question was how we can submerge beauty standards. I think it's all about autonomy and power. Like if you empower minorities, what Marie just said, I feel like that would be the best way to actually represent how society is, how we actually feel about ourselves, how we can empower ourselves. So it doesn't represent just a narrow view of just the white cisgendered, skinny white people, but just a more broader way. And well, in theory, it is already done, but then you get, for example, with the mixed race babies, for example, this whole hype, and that's because I feel the producers behind that they're not really mixed. So I feel like maybe if we were more aware of diversity, also on the workplace, then it would also be more beneficial to have more diverse beauty standards.
I'm Penelope and I'm a student here in Groningen. And my way of thinking, I don't want to promote nudity, but I feel like sometimes we live in this bubble, that okay, there's this beauty standard, everyone is thin, so we focus on thin bodies and then we compare ourselves to those bodies. So it's how you see the world as well. So I feel like if I see more diversity in my surroundings, then I feel like it's natural for me to just have the curve and just have cellulite and just have all these little flaws that make my body what it is. So I see clothes as sometimes restrictions that you put on your body and you hide it and you feel uncomfortable and you're like, oh, this looks fat, I'm gonna hide it, this looks this, I'm gonna hide it. And I feel sometimes when I don't wear so many clothes, I feel more free and I feel more flexible to move around and just feel my body, feel all the layers and feel the flesh and just touch it and just be in touch with how I am and how I feel. So nudity for me, I'm not pro nudity, everyone go naked, but if we see these bodies in person and we witness all the different flaws of every body, because each body is unique, each body is different, then we will see it and we will perhaps be more able to accept our own body as well, other than just looking and focusing on this thin body and then comparing it directly back at us and seeing only the bad shit around us and not the good. So that's how I see it.
Can I just quickly respond to Club? Because I was thinking about that this morning and I actually posted something on Facebook about it. And actually I am pro nudity because our beauty, the body is a beautiful thing, and I think we stain it with all these ideas of what should be or what should not be, because a body is just a body until we put all these negative meanings all over it. And so I would say the naked body is something really beautiful, and actually your flaws is just a part of you. It's what you call flaws, I wouldn't even say it's flaws, it's just something that becomes a part of you. So I would say that, yeah, nudity, and in both of your points, I think representation is really important.
Yeah.
In people seeing more diversity, that's how we could probably change. Because I think growing up, I always saw white people on the television. So I was always like, I want a white boyfriend. And yeah, I think that kind of like made me only see that as beautiful. So representation is extremely important here, so that we could see all the diversity and the wonderfulness of the world, and we won't be like one track in our thinking.
What I kind of want to say about representation and diversity, I'm just going to turn this one back to the table at large, is that it won't be enough to just put different bodies in the same advertisements we were talking about earlier. In the same way that I think nowadays you see a lot of like makeup companies going feminist and being like, oh, empower yourself, slather yourself in 5 layers of makeup. I think it won't help just if you say, you know, here's this plus size model.
Yeah.
You must attain to this plus size model standard of beauty, because we're still selling this as beauty. So earlier when I sort of read this question out loud, I realized actually maybe we just need to change. We need to stop thinking about ourselves in terms of beautiful or beautiful and ugly, and also not try to categorize say like look at all these beautiful people. Although you know I think everyone is beautiful and there's beauty in everyone, but I think it shouldn't be the value by which we are judging each other and ourselves. And I think that just by putting representation, especially in advertising, I think representation is so important in the narratives we tell, etc. And if there's going to be advertising, then of course in advertising, but I think advertising really needs to fundamentally change, and the commercial aspects of the beauty industry fundamentally need to change. And it's not just by putting in more kinds of bodies that you're going to fundamentally, because there's always going to be someone excluded. You know?
Yeah, if we're all unique, then we'd all have to be in the magazines to feel actually included in that ideal, and otherwise we wouldn't feel as beautiful as all the people that are in the magazines.
But I think there's still always going to be a certain type of person that gets in the magazines, because that's just the way it works. Like, if you're, as long as you're in some degree normative enough, you will make it in. But as soon as you like sort of cross a boundary of being not normative enough.
Yeah, I think representation is important, but I also agree with you in the sense that we have to really know how we go about advertising. What's the intention behind advertising or representation? So is it to really uplift people, or is it just to make money?
Is it just to use people to make money? Because I think often that's how it ends up being.
I was thinking back to your point of like stop thinking about people as beautiful, people as ugly. I think that's a really good point, because so this is a very like logical reductionist point, but if you keep pushing this idea that everyone's beautiful, then if everyone's beautiful, no one's beautiful. You know, it's this kind of thing that it doesn't matter anymore. So like, why keep talking about beauty as a positive characteristic that people define themselves by? Why do I have to think of myself as beautiful as something good? Am I not like 100 other things that matter more than being beautiful? So like, yeah, we're all beautiful, but like, does it matter?
And even if you are like ugly, because some people are considered ugly or consider themselves ugly. Like, if you think you're ugly, that should not determine your self-worth. That should not be the thing that makes you a valid person or a good person. I see you two just left. If you wanted to like say some final points.
Make it a good thing to be ugly again.
Yeah.
Like why can't we all be beautifully ugly together?
But that's true, right? When you think about it, people who are considered beautiful, I think to myself all the time that beauty is there to be used. People just use you for your beauty. So what else is there besides the beauty?
I also find that there's like so much pressure on women and feminine people to only strive for being beautiful that they hardly consider themselves as worthy if they do not reach that goal. And
or if that's not an important goal for them,
like
then they lose their worth.
Why should that be your goal in life? Like, why can't we just care about the things we would want to care about if we look?
What?
No, sorry.
I missed something.
No,
No, it's okay. Keep talking. Sorry.
Okay, why can't we just care about the things that we find important? And like, I, for example, get sexualized or find beautiful all the time, and I'm like, why can't you just look at the dress I made instead of tell me that I look pretty or something? Like, I'm proud of this dress and the rest.
Skilled at this stuff.
And then nobody cares about what I want to show, and that's annoying.
People see just that what's on the outside, and they don't see that a person is such a multifaceted thing. You know, there's so much to what makes up a person.
It's such a shallow.
I think there's an audience question.
Yes.
If you want to come forwards, we have like 2 more minutes to round up this discussion, but if you want to make like a nice, sharp closing statement, come up really close. Just sit next to Claudia. Want to introduce yourself?
Yes.
Oh, do you want to say something too? Yeah, pull up your chair. Oh yeah, you can say something. Yeah, of course. You can take final things. Yeah, go.
Hi, I'm Nick, from Sweden, and regarding the beauty and how to deconstruct beauty within the community, like how we all can change the way we feel about beauty, I would like to maybe talk about something that is a little bit different but still related and still very relevant to me. I think that we should stop thinking about beauty products and clothes we make, clothes we buy just to feel beautiful, only as we see them on the shelf, but also see at how they are produced. Because for me there is a certain beauty in sustainably obtained cosmetics and clothes, and personally I would invite everyone to think about whether the cosmetics they buy and clothes they wear are really beautiful if they are the product of someone's suffering.
That's a really good point.
I like that. You had
Mama?
Yeah, I was just there was a point that you brought up about representation. Sorry. There's a point that you brought up about representation in the industry as well, but like especially within, and I'm gonna bring up race again, but especially within the the black community as well. There's always this preference for lighter skinned people as representation of all black people, and that often puts this clash between darker skinned women and lighter skinned women in particular, or feminine identified people. So there's always creates this conflict because obviously, as Lily mentioned, this whole colonization has really left this impact on us, and I feel like especially within Africa and the Caribbean and also other black diaspora around the world as well, there's always that fight to
But you know, it's
Yeah.
not a new thing.
Yeah, it's
because
not a new thing.
colorism
Yeah, because
has always
yeah,
been there, and I
colours-
think in advertisement now they're just using that,
Yeah, they're also kind of
And-
spitting us.
and it's kind of like causing friction in the community, which I think already existed. It's just that they're putting the flame, making the sparks into flames.
Yeah, like they're kind of raising the fire
Yeah.
even more because even so, like, obviously, like, growing up in England as well, like, my friend, she was telling that even in her school, she had, like, predominantly black as well, and a lot of the darker skinned girls felt more inferior because all the black boys made them feel inferior even though they were darker skinned themselves.
Yeah.
So within that community as well, there's always this pressure to kind of like fit in even more. And I see that also, it's not just as within the black community, I also see that within the Asian community as well, because I also have friends who are from other Asian countries, from the Southern Asian regions and East Asia and Southeast Asia. And there's that similar kind of wall between
Yeah.
darker skinned and lighter skinned, and it's just,
Yeah.
it's a very hard.
It's because of the
Yeah.
I guess again it's the Eurocentric beauty standards where what is closer in proximity to
Yeah.
white
Yeah,
is seen as worth more or more beautiful.
yeah.
So that's the same thing that's happening.
Yeah, and like in advertising as well, because when I did my internship in China as well, they kind of applied because obviously whiter skin is seen as more beautiful because of old ancient customs that the rich used to stay indoors all the time and they were mostly pale, while the poorer people who worked in the farms and everything had darker skin. So there's kind of this connection, and that they use that connection to apply to white people who live in Asia and darker skinned people who live in Asia as well. And especially for people who want to do jobs there, like teaching, they use white faces as a way to bring in more people and more students to come study English, for example. And because there they don't really know how to distinguish, only they know America and US, they will see, if they see a white face, obviously they feel more secure. Yeah, feel more, yeah, I know, it's really strange, but they feel more secure and feel more, that they can trust. Whereas if they see like a darker skinned person, it sort of brings down the value of the school.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
But I think to tie it up, I think George had a really good point, and that was we need to stop seeing bodies and placing our ideologies on them. I think just why can't a body just be a body and you not place anything on it? So I think that would be a good way to the right direction to go in.
And it has to start with the children.
Yes,
The
Yeah,
children.
a bit closer to the microphone. I'm sorry, I forgot your name already.
Tamali.
Tamali just said it has to start with the children. I don't know if the microphone well picked it up.
Yes, because it's very important, because I see it in school with my daughter. She's 6 years old, and it really has to start there.
Yeah.
Because there's the beginning of everything.
Yeah. That's where the minds of
Are
they're most
brainwashed
impressionable.
and
Impressionable.
yes, yes. They really have to start to change by the children, to talk with the children, and listen to children.
Yeah.
What they say, because we can learn a lot from the children. Because the children don't see no color, they don't see no flaws, they don't see nothing. They see human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Until we they're taught.
Yeah.
Yeah.
May I say something about this?
I think you can say one more thing because you wanted to say a thing, and then we have to move on to our closing segments because we are running. I'd love to keep having this conversation
Yes.
2 hours even, but yeah.
What I wanted to say is that we cannot just trust on companies and big corporations to and push them to go for more diverse representations. I think it's also very important to do these kind of like these kind of ground up events like this to educate people about how bullshit our mainstream beauty standards are and like what actually is behind all that. And when you start to see like how constructed all of that is, then you can also that can also help you to accept yourself much easier and to come to terms with like the extent to which you do not fit in these mainstream beauty ideals, and to think of yourself as beautiful in spite of them, or to just think of yourself as, well, I'm not beautiful, but what the hell does it matter? What does beauty mean anyway?
And I think in that part we have to create our own representation.
We have to create our own representation, and we have to we have to not depend on big corporations, because they will always create their own ways of like excluding certain people from the idea that they are beautiful.
Yeah.
And so also I think it's super important to really make people aware of the ways in which we use language to make to reinforce certain beauty ideals. For example, I hear this same conversation so often, friends saying to other friends, like a friend complaining like, oh, I'm so fat, I think I really should lose some weight or something like that, and then somebody else is like, no, you're not fat, you're beautiful, you look just great like you are. Actually, that is so reinforcing the idea that fat would somehow be bad, that it would be ugly, that there's something wrong with that, and that we should just start to become aware of how the language we use, even if it is meant to positively reinforce our friends or others, it can be very destructive and can really reinforce these really destructive ideas. That's what I wanted to say on this.
Okay. So I think the way I'm going to do these segments is I'm going to shout out our Feminist of the Month, then I'm going to do my plugs, and then I think it would be pretty cool if we could just sort of end on the poem, and that would be our closing bit.
That's awesome.
Yeah? So our Feminist of the Month this month is Michiel. Michiel too is an artist and a creator, and they also organize this entire festival. It's amazing because they're not here and they're going to just hear this when they listen to the podcast.
Yeah, awesome.
You can find her work on I think at Quinton Zero on Instagram. So she does a lot of like visual arts, a lot of sound art as well. There's I think Michiel or Quinton also has a YouTube account, and their work is always super intersectional and sort of explores sort of the boundaries of language and gender, and it's really cool. We are hosted by Zomaar Radio. They have kindly provided this cool portable device that looks like a cute furry animal. They have all kinds of... Did you just say furry? Did you just make a furry joke?
No. I said Furby.
Oh, it's like a Furby. Okay, that's actually so true because it's like electronic and everything. They have a lot of podcasts about all kinds of subjects. They've got music shows. They've got talk shows. They've got our feminist thing. They've got God, what's the one with the cinema? There's a cinema.
Vera Cinema.
No, it's not Vera Cinema. It's like the one that also Caitlin is on and Natalia.
Oh.
They have one about Kinozuka. Kinozuka has one on their show, on their channel. You can find them at zomaarradio.nl, on Mixcloud at Zomaar Radio, on Instagram at Zomaar Radio, on Facebook at Zomaar Radio. I don't have any events that I wrote down on this note, but please come to our weekly meeting next week. It will be about kink. Oh, and for the listeners, they won't hear that. Do you know what the meeting is after kink?
Ecofeminism.
Ecofeminism? Ecofeminism. So, because this will come out next week. So, the day that you're hearing this, dear listeners, it will be kink. The next week, it will be ecofeminism. I don't know why I'm staring at the thing as I think I'm here. We are doing an overhaul. It's a new year, so a new board, of which I appear to have half with me. Claudia, Amy, and Verla are all on the new GFN board. We're also looking, small applause. We're also looking for new committee members, especially for the campaigns committee, the events committee. If you like podcasts, you can join the podcast team. There's a lot of other committees. We've got a crafts club, book club, film club. There's probably going to be an activist committee, so check it out. Check our Facebook out. We've got a Facebook page where we do our external information and a Facebook group. So if you want to get more involved, you can just ask to join the group, the Groningen Feminist Network. That's all it for plugs. Thank you for listening. And now Emmy will read us a poem. Do you want to introduce that?
Sure, yeah. I'm just going to read a short poem written by somebody called Travis Alabanza, who is a non-binary performance artist who works and lives in London, and they recently came to Groningen and did a performance which was amazing, and where I got this wonderful book full of their poetry. And I'd like to read just a short poem that I happened upon and thought was very fitting to the theme today. So here goes. There's no title. This body is not a target board. This body is not a site of destruction. This body is not open for public consumption. This body is not theirs. This body is fucking beautiful. This body is part of a human. This body is human, alien, animal, sacred, anything it wants to be. This body deserves life. This body is fucking important. This body is fucking important. This body is fucking important. Repeat until you believe it.
That's a wrap.
Thank you for being such a lovely audience. It was really great.
Thank you for the participation.
And if you want to talk about any of this stuff, like, I don't know if we can stay here, but we can definitely talk about it somewhere around.
Yeah.
We're already way over time.
Space.
In the arts room.
Oh yeah, totally go to the art room. And
Yeah, in 5 minutes, run, have fries, and run back. I guess.
We also start